Hello again, my loves. Welcome back. Today's story is about Carla, a woman who thought she had her whole life figured out. She had her routine, her plans, her very carefully constructed sense of who she was. And then she walked into a martial arts gym on a Thursday evening just to try something new, and everything she thought she knew about herself started to come undone, one training session at a time. The woman who did that to her? Her name is Maria. And Maria didn't try. She didn't have to. She was just herself. Patient, strong, direct in a way that made Carla feel seen in ways she didn't know how to handle. This is a story full of tension, of silences that say more than sentences, and of one woman's slow, terrifying, beautiful discovery that the life she'd built might not be the one she actually wanted. Stay with me until the end. I promise you. It's worth it. I was looking for my gym bag. That's how it started. Not with a confession, not with a revelation. With a zipper and a missing water bottle and me going through the side pocket of a bag I hadn't opened in 2 weeks. And that's when I found it. A rubber band. The kind Maria wore on her wrist during every training session, snapping it against her skin when she was concentrating on something. A small unconscious habit I'd cataloged without meaning to. It must have slipped off during the last time we sparred. It must have caught inside my bag somehow. It was just a rubber band, thin, red, slightly worn at the edges. I stood in the middle of my bedroom for a very long time holding that rubber band. And I knew, in the way you know things before you're ready to say them out loud, that I was in serious trouble. I started training at Westside Martial Arts on a Thursday in October. My friend Denise had been going for months and kept telling me I'd love it, that it would be good for my stress levels, that it was more interesting than the treadmill I'd been ignoring at my apartment complex's gym. I finally said yes, just to get her to stop bringing it up at brunch. I was 31 years old. I worked in marketing. I had a very clean apartment, a reliable car, a sister I called every Sunday, and a general sense that my life was going in the right direction, even if I couldn't always remember what the destination was supposed to be. I was not the kind of person who fell apart over things. The gym was smaller than I expected. Mats on the floor, punching bags along one wall, mirrors across the other, the kind of fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look a little more serious than they intended. There were about 12 people when I walked in for the beginner's session. I recognized Denise immediately. She waved from across the room, already in her gear, looking annoyingly at home. The instructor was a woman named Coach Reyes, short, practical, with the kind of physical confidence that makes you stand up straighter just being near her. She welcomed me to the group, asked about my experience level, nodded when I said none, and handed me over to one of the more advanced students for a basic orientation. "Maria will show you the fundamentals," she said. "She's the best teacher here. Mostly because she has infinite patience." I turned around. Maria was standing a few feet away, tightening the wrap around her left hand, not looking at me yet. She was tall, not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. Dark hair pulled back in a low bun. A gray training shirt, faded at the collar. She finished with the wrap, finally looked up, and gave me a nod that was completely neutral and somehow also entirely present. "Carla?" she said. "Yeah." "Nice to meet you. Have you ever done any martial arts before?" "No." "Good," she said. "Less to unlearn." That was it. That was the beginning. Nothing remarkable happened in that first session. Maria showed me the basic stance, the difference between a jab and a cross, how to hold my wrists so I wouldn't hurt myself. She corrected my footwork 3 times without making me feel stupid about it. She was focused and patient and very matter-of-fact, and I went home thinking she seemed competent and a little reserved and that I'd probably see her once a week, and gradually get better at throwing punches, and that would be the whole story. I was very wrong. Over the next few weeks, I started going twice a week, then 3 times. Denise noticed before I said anything. She raised her eyebrows at me on a Tuesday evening when I showed up again, and I told her I was just trying to build consistency, which was partially true. Maria was almost always there. She trained with the advanced group and sometimes helped Coach Reyes with the newer students. We didn't talk a lot outside of the training context, but within that context, she was precise and attentive, and she remembered things. She remembered that I favored my right side and kept reminding me to use my left. She remembered that I got in my head when I was tired and would say very quietly, "Don't think. Move," which was the most annoying and effective coaching I'd ever received. After about a month, we started sparring together regularly. Light sparring, contact controlled, more about reading movement than about strength. And that's when I started noticing things I shouldn't have been noticing. The way she moved was different when it was the two of us. Deliberate, like she was paying full attention in a way that had weight to it. When she corrected my stance, she'd put her hand briefly on my shoulder or my arm, always purposeful, never lingering, and every single time, I had to work to bring my focus back to what she was saying, instead of to the fact that her hand was there. I told myself this was normal. She was my training partner. She was touching my arm to adjust my form. I was just not used to physical contact in a professional context. That was all. I was very good at telling myself things that weren't quite true. The first time I genuinely laughed with Maria, really laughed, was about 6 weeks in. I'd attempted a takedown we'd been working on, and I did it completely wrong. Not dangerously, just comically, and ended up on the mat before I even processed what had happened. I lay there for a second looking up at the ceiling, and then from above me, I heard a sound I hadn't heard from her before. A low, genuine laugh. Not at me exactly. More like with the moment. I started laughing too. I couldn't help it. She reached down and helped me up. Her grip was steady. "That was impressively incorrect," she said. "Thank you," I said. "I've been practicing." She smiled. A real one. The kind that reached her eyes. The kind that I realized I hadn't seen from her before. And something very small shifted, in a way I wasn't ready to look at directly. We started talking after sessions sometimes, just a few minutes. Getting water, stretching, the way people do when they've spent an hour physically focused together, and the transition back to regular life feels slightly abrupt. I learned that Maria had been training for almost 8 years, that she had a degree in physical therapy and worked at a sports medicine clinic, that she was originally from San Antonio, that she had an older sister she talked to every Sunday. "Me too," I said, when she mentioned the Sunday sister calls. "That's exactly what I do." She looked at me with something that wasn't quite a smile. "Maybe we're more similar than we look," she said. I didn't know what to do with that. So I just nodded and said something about the weather, which was not my finest conversational moment. But I kept thinking about it on the drive home. Maybe we're more similar than we look. I replayed that sentence approximately 9 times before I fell asleep that night. I told myself that was because I found it philosophically interesting. I was running out of things to tell myself. There was a Tuesday in November that I keep coming back to. It was a harder session than usual. Coach Reyes had been pushing everyone to work on ground defense. What to do when you're taken down, how to manage position, how not to panic when you lose the standing advantage. It sounds straightforward when you describe it. It is not straightforward when you're on a mat, and someone is moving against your resistance, and your brain is trying to do 12 things at once. Maria and I had been paired together for most of the drills. She took me down, efficiently, cleanly, the way she did everything. And I ended up on my back with her kneeling over me, her weight on my hips, both of my wrists pinned above my head. The position was entirely standard for the drill. It's called control positioning. It's the point. But then she stopped. Not in a way that anything was wrong, in a way that felt deliberate. She looked down at me, and there was a second, maybe 2, where neither of us moved, and the gym noise fell away, and the fluorescent lights above her made the edges of her look very clear and sharp. And I became aware of my own heartbeat, in a way I hadn't been 60 seconds earlier. And then she said it, quietly, almost carefully. "Do you want me to get off now?" It was a training question. It was absolutely, objectively, simply a training question. The next part of the drill was for me to practice the escape sequence, and she was asking if I was ready to move into that phase. That was what she was asking. I know that's what she was asking. But something about the way the words landed, the pause before them, the way her eyes didn't move from mine, the particular quietness of her voice in that moment, made the question feel like it was carrying more weight than its technical meaning. I said yes. I don't remember my voice being entirely steady. She got up. We continued the drill. We did not talk about it. On the drive home, I turned the radio off and drove in complete silence for 20 minutes, which I never do. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't even sure what I was feeling, but I was aware, for the first time with a clarity I couldn't rationalize away, that something was happening to me. Something that had been building slowly enough that I'd been able to ignore it until the ignoring stopped working. I didn't say anything to anyone about it, but I started paying attention in a different way, not consciously choosing to. It just happened, the way your eyes adjust in a dark room without you deciding to try harder. I noticed the way Maria moved through space, the way she listened when people talked to her, really listened, face forward, giving the whole of her attention, the way she was direct without being harsh. She'd tell you exactly what wasn't working, but she'd say it in a way that made you want to fix it rather than defend it. I noticed the rubber band on her wrist, the way she'd snap it absently when she was thinking. I noticed that she drank her water in long, unhurried drinks, and then capped the bottle without looking at her hands. I noticed that when she laughed at something genuinely funny, she turned her face slightly away, like she was a little surprised by the laugh. These are not the things you notice about someone you're indifferent to. I did not examine that sentence too closely. Instead, I started doing things that I told myself were completely unrelated. I started getting to training a little earlier. I changed the order of my warm-up routine so it ended near where Maria usually set up her bag. I started stretching longer after sessions in the general area where she was stretching. None of these things were dramatic. They were small gravitational adjustments, the kind that accumulate without announcing themselves. Denise noticed anyway. "You and Maria talk a lot," she said one evening, very casually, on our way to the parking lot. "We train together," I said. "That's it." "Right," Denise said, in the voice she uses when she means the opposite. I changed the subject. She let me. But something about Denise noticing made it more real, which made it more uncomfortable, which made me realize how much energy I was spending not examining what was in front of me. One Saturday, Maria and I ended up at the same coffee shop near the gym by accident, or by the kind of coincidence that doesn't feel entirely accidental when you look back on it. We ended up sitting together. 2 hours went by before either of us acknowledged that we'd been there 2 hours. She told me about a patient at her clinic who was recovering from a shoulder reconstruction and was impatient with the pace of healing, and the way she talked about it, with this particular combination of practicality and genuine care, made something move in my chest that I immediately categorized as admiration, because admiration was a category I could manage. She asked me about my work, and I talked about a campaign I was running, and she asked good questions. Not polite questions, but curious ones, like she actually wanted to understand how it worked. Nobody asks me curious questions about marketing. Most people nod and change the subject. Maria leaned forward slightly and said, "So you're essentially trying to make people feel something first and think about it second?" And I said, "Yes, exactly." And she said, "That's interesting. That's basically how the body learns movement too." I thought about that for the rest of the day. I thought about the way she leaned forward when something interested her. I thought about the 2 hours that felt like 30 minutes. I came home and sat on my couch and looked at my apartment, which was clean and organized and had everything in it I'd chosen to have, and felt for the first time in a long time like something was missing. Not in a sad way. In the specific way of realizing that there's a word in another language for a feeling you've had your whole life and never been able to name. I still didn't name it, but it was getting harder not to. December came in cold that year. Maria and I had settled into something I didn't have a clean word for. We were training partners. We were something like friends. We had each other's numbers and texted occasionally, mostly about scheduling, sometimes about other things, the kind of texts that start practical and wander into actual conversation before closing with something like "see you Thursday." I reread our text thread one night at 11:30, not looking for anything specific, just rereading. I put my phone down and stared at the ceiling for a while. There's this thing that happens when you've been careful with yourself for a long time. You get good at the careful. You get so good that you stop feeling the effort of it. It just becomes the shape of how you move through your life. And then something comes along that makes the carefulness visible. And suddenly you can feel the effort of every single day you've spent maintaining it, all at once, like carrying a weight you forgot was there until you put it down for a second. I hadn't put anything down, but I could feel the weight. I started avoiding certain moments. If Maria sat next to me during a water break, I'd find a reason to stand up. If a conversation was starting to go somewhere that felt too easy, too natural, too much like the coffee shop Saturday, I'd redirect it. Not obviously. I'm good at not being obvious. But I was redirecting. She noticed. I could tell she noticed because she didn't say anything. And Maria was not a person who avoided saying things when she had something to say. The fact that she was giving me space I hadn't asked for out loud meant she could see that I needed it, which meant she was seeing me more clearly than I was seeing myself. That bothered me more than the feeling itself. There was one night at training in mid-December where everything felt very close to the surface. Coach Reyes had kept us late working on a sequence that wasn't clicking for the group, and by the time it was over, most people had cleared out. Maria and I were the last two on the mat, cooling down. The gym was quiet in that specific way. Not empty, but settled. The way a room feels when the energy from a lot of people is just left, and you're standing in what remains. She was sitting on the mat with her knees pulled up, unwrapping her hands, and I was stretching out my shoulder, and neither of us was talking. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. That was the problem. It was the opposite. The kind of comfortable that has texture to it, that you're aware of in your body. "Hey," she said after a while. I looked over. "Hey." She didn't say anything else right away. Just looked at me with those steady dark eyes that I had learned did not look away when they were looking at you. Like the world could go on happening around her, and she'd remain exactly where she was. "Are you okay?" she said. "Yeah," I said. "Why? You seem like you're somewhere else lately." I held her gaze. "I'm here," I said. "I know you're here," she said. That's not what I said. I didn't have an answer for that. Or I had one, and I didn't say it. The difference matters. She finished unwrapping her hands and balled up the wraps and put them in her bag. When she looked up again, she wasn't pushing. She was just present. That's the word for it. Just entirely present, in the way she always was. And for a second, I felt something like vertigo. Not dizziness, but the sensation of standing at an edge and looking down. "I'm fine," I said. "Just a lot going on with work." She nodded. She didn't believe me. We both knew she didn't believe me. But she didn't push. She zipped her bag, stood up, offered me her hand to help me up off the mat. I took her hand. She pulled. I stood. She let go. I drove home that night and sat in my parked car for about 10 minutes before going inside, looking at the steering wheel. Very still. There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being in close proximity to something that you want, and choosing not to reach for it. Over and over. So many times that the choosing starts to become its own kind of exhausting. I had spent weeks choosing, carefully, to be a certain amount of distance from whatever was happening. And I was tired. Not of her. Of the distance. I called my sister on Sunday, and she asked how I was, and I said fine. And she said I sounded like something was on my mind. And I said I was just tired, and she said okay. And we talked about her kids and her job, and I laughed in the right places. After I hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand and thought, when did I get so good at this? The gym closed for the holidays. 2 weeks without training. 2 weeks without seeing Maria. I told myself this would help. That distance was exactly what I needed. That I'd come back in January with some perspective, and the whole thing would have settled back into something manageable. Instead, I found her rubber band in my gym bag while looking for my water bottle, and I stood in my bedroom holding it, and I felt something in my chest that I had been carefully, diligently, exhaustingly refusing to feel for months. And the word for it was not admiration. The word for it was something I'd been afraid to say even inside my own head. The word was, I miss her. And underneath that, I think I have for a very long time. And underneath that, I don't know what to do with that, but I know I can't keep pretending I don't feel it. I sat down on the edge of my bed. I didn't cry. I just sat there, very still, like the moment right after something finally stops pretending to be something else. But before we go on, if you've made it this far, it means something in this story touched something real in you. That feeling of carrying something you haven't named yet. That exhausting distance you keep choosing on purpose. So if this story is landing for you, hit the like button right now. It helps me more than you know, and it tells YouTube to share this with someone else who might need it. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and ring the bell. That's how you find out the moment a new story goes up here. Now tell me something in the comments. Have you ever kept a distance from someone because getting closer felt too big to handle? What made you finally stop keeping it? Tell me. I read every single one. And where are you watching from? Drop your city. I'll heart it. Now, back to Carla. The gym reopened the first week of January. I went on a Thursday. My usual time. I told myself I was going because I'd missed training, which was true, technically. I was rusty after 2 weeks off, and I wanted to get back into it. I also knew that Maria trained on Thursdays. I got there a few minutes early. The mat was mostly empty. I did my warm-up, and then the door opened and she came in, and I felt my whole body do that thing, that awareness, that slight internal adjustment, like a compass needle finding north. And I looked down at my hands and breathed very deliberately for a second. She saw me, cross the mat. Happy New Year, she said. You too, I said. And then she did something she'd never done before. She reached out and hugged me. Brief, genuine, easy. The kind of hug that says I missed you without saying it in words. Her arms were solid around me for exactly long enough that I could feel it in my sternum. She let go. I let go. We both pretended like my face wasn't doing something. We trained. It was good. I was rusty and she was patient, as always. And by the end of the session, I was looser and warmer, and the 2 weeks off felt like they'd been wrung out of my muscles. We stretched out near each other afterward. The gym had emptied out again. I found your rubber band, I said. I don't know why I said it right then. It just came out. She looked at me. What? The one from your wrist. It was in my gym bag. I've had it since before the holidays. She was quiet for a second. You could have just texted me, she said. I know, I said. She kept looking at me. There was something different in the look. Not reading me exactly. More like waiting. Like she'd been waiting for a while and was seeing if this was finally the moment. Why didn't you? She asked. I looked at my hands. Because I didn't know how to say what else I wanted to say. and the rubber band felt like it would open that door, and I wasn't ready to open it. The gym was very quiet. "What door?" she said. "Soft." I looked up, and the thing about Maria, the thing I'd been managing around for months, was exactly this. She didn't look away. She stayed exactly where she was, and she waited. And her patience wasn't passive. It was the most active thing in the room. "Maria," I said. And then I didn't say anything for a second, because the next part was the part I'd been carrying for months, and saying it out loud meant it became real. And real things have consequences, and consequences. I was very aware of consequences. "I know," she said, quietly. "You know what? I know what the door is," she said. "I've known for a while. I've been waiting for you to be ready to open it." My throat felt strange. What if I don't know how to be ready for something like this? "That's allowed," she said. "And what if I've spent a really long time not even knowing what to call it? And then I spent more time knowing and not saying, and I'm honestly not sure I've been fair to either of us in the process." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, very simply, "Carla, I'm still here, aren't I?" Something that had been locked for a very long time shifted. I felt it physically. Like a door that was always locked, but turned out to be unlocked. It just needed someone to try the handle. "I don't know what comes next," I said. "Neither do I," she said. "That's usually how it works. I have things I need to figure out, things I need to say to people in my life. It's not simple." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking you to make it simple. I'm asking if you're done pretending it's not there." I thought about the rubber band in my bag, the 2 weeks I held it without telling her, the 10 minutes in my parked car, the texts I reread at 11:30, the weight of the careful, the distance I kept choosing, the exhaustion of choosing it. "I'm done pretending," I said. She let out a slow breath. Not dramatic, just the release of something held, and then she smiled at me. The real one. The one that reached her eyes. The one I'd filed away and thought about and refused to examine too closely. "Good," she said. That's all I needed to hear. We didn't hug again. We didn't need to. There was a kind of quiet between us that felt completely different from all the other quiets. It was full instead of careful. It was ours. But I knew, driving home, that I wasn't done. That what had just happened was the beginning of something, not the end. That there were conversations I'd been avoiding with myself and with other people that I couldn't avoid anymore. The easy part was telling Maria. The hard part was everything that came next. My sister called on Sunday. Her timing has always been uncanny. I picked up, and we did our usual opening questions, and about 10 minutes in I went quiet and she said, "Okay, what is it?" I took a breath. "I have something to tell you," I said, "and I don't know exactly how to say it, so I'm just going to say it." There was a long pause after I did, and then my sister said, Okay, come on. How long have you known?" That made me laugh, which made me cry a little, which she talked me through. Then there was my mother. That call was harder and took longer and ended without a clean resolution, and I sat with the discomfort of that for days. My mother loves me. I want to say that clearly, because the difficulty wasn't about the love. The difficulty was about the distance between her understanding of my life and the actual shape of it, and that distance couldn't close in one phone call. It was going to take time. I was willing to give it time, but I was no longer willing to maintain the fiction for her comfort. That part was over. There were friends to tell. One took it with warmth and zero surprise, told me she'd been waiting for me to figure this out. One went quiet in a way that I could feel through the phone, said she needed some time to process, which I respected, without knowing if it would change things between us permanently. There were days in there that were hard. Not because of Maria. Maria was a constant, an anchor, the clearest thing in my life during a period when a lot of other things were rearranging themselves. But because honesty has a cost, and I was paying it, and some of the people I loved were in the middle of adjusting to a version of me that was more complete than the one they'd known, I lost some ground. Some relationships went quieter than I would have chosen. My mother and I had 3 difficult phone calls in a row before something cracked open, and what came through wasn't resolution, but the beginning of one. That felt like enough. I held on to enough. And in the middle of all of it, Maria. We started spending time together outside the gym, coffee that ran to 3 hours, walks. A Sunday morning at a farmer's market where she picked up a bunch of herbs and spent 10 minutes describing exactly what she was going to make with them. And I listened and watched her hands and thought, this is what it feels like when something is exactly right. She didn't rush me through any of it. She asked questions and listened to the answers and said honest things when she thought I needed honest things and said nothing when she thought I needed space. She was not perfect. Nobody is. And the fact that she wasn't is part of what made it real. She got impatient sometimes. She'd had her own longer version of this process years earlier and occasionally forgot that other people's timelines weren't hers to set. We disagreed about things and said so and kept going. That turned out to be its own kind of intimacy. Disagreeing and staying. One evening in February, we were in her apartment, sitting on her kitchen floor eating takeout because the table was covered in her work papers and neither of us had moved them. And something very ordinary was happening. She was telling me about her patient with the shoulder, who was finally making real progress, and I was listening. And the kitchen light was warm, and the takeout containers were open between us, and her hair was slightly messy from training earlier, and I thought, I gave something up for this, and it was worth it. Not because of her specifically, though because of her too, but because of the version of myself that I had access to now that I'd stopped closing the door. The version that could sit on someone's kitchen floor and feel exactly at home. The version that could be seen fully, without the careful distance, without the management. I had spent a long time building a life that fit the shape of who I thought I was supposed to be. And I'd been good at it, and it had not been enough. And some part of me had known that for longer than I was willing to admit. And Maria, the way she moved, the way she waited, the way she looked at me like the waiting was fine, had been the first person to make the knowing impossible to ignore. March. A Saturday. Maria and I were at the gym for an open session. No class, just free training time. It was quiet. A few other people scattered around. We'd been working on something we'd been drilling for weeks, a particular sequence, and it finally clicked. I did it right. Actually, right. Not almost right or close enough. Fully, cleanly correct. She looked at me for a second after, and then she said, "There it is." 2 words. But the way she said them, with the particular warmth that she reserved for moments she actually meant, made something in me settle completely. Not land, exactly. Settle. Like something that had been vibrating slightly for a long time had finally come to rest. We sat down on the mat after, cooling down, water bottles in hand. "I need to tell you something," I said. She looked over. "Okay." "I keep waiting to feel like I made a mistake," I said. "Like at some point it's going to catch up to me and I'm going to wish I'd chosen differently." And it doesn't come. I looked at her. I lost some things, I know that. My relationship with my mom is still finding its footing. One of my oldest friends is still being distant. I don't know how that's going to resolve. I'm not pretending those things don't hurt. She nodded. She didn't minimize it or fill the space with reassurance. She just listened. "But I don't wish I'd chosen differently," I said. "I thought I would. I thought there would be some moment where the cost would feel too high. And there's been no moment like that. There's just been this. I gestured vaguely at the gym. At her. At the mat under us and the water bottles and the February afternoon coming in through the high windows. This, she said, like she was trying out the word. Yeah, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, can I tell you something? Obviously. I almost didn't wait, she said. In December, when you went somewhere else for a while, I almost said this isn't worth it. She's not there yet. You should let it go. My chest did something. What made you not? She looked at me with those steady dark eyes. Because every time you thought I wasn't watching, you looked at me like I was something you couldn't quite believe was real, and I figured that was worth a little patience. I didn't say anything to that. I couldn't. Quite. I looked down at my hands for a second and then back up at her, and she was still looking at me, and the gym noise was low and far away, and the moment felt private in the way that only certain moments do. Like it belonged only to us. Like even describing it to someone else later would lose something essential about what it actually was. Thank you, I said. For waiting. Thank you for showing up, she said. Simple. Direct. Hers. I had walked into this gym 5 months ago looking for something to do with my Thursday evenings. I had not expected to be taken apart and rebuilt in the same space. I had not expected to discover that the careful life I'd constructed was only careful because I was afraid of what it would cost me to want what I actually wanted. It cost something. I want to be honest about that. Some of what I gave up was things I'd thought were permanent. Some of those losses are still in process, still working toward whatever they're going to become. But I am not the same person who walked in on that October Thursday. I'm not smaller. I'm not simpler. I'm just more completely myself, in the way that only happens when you stop performing a version of yourself for comfort, yours or anyone else's. And on a Saturday in March, sitting on a mat in a quiet gym, I looked at Maria, and I did not feel afraid. I did not feel careful. I did not feel the weight of a door I was refusing to open. I felt, for the first time in longer than I knew, entirely present, and entirely myself. And that, all of that, was worth every single thing it cost. She didn't fix me. That's the thing I want to make clear. Maria wasn't a discovery I made instead of discovering myself. She was the person who made me stop looking away from what was already there. The hardest choices I ever made, calling my sister, calling my mother, standing in the space of someone's distance while they figured out how to adjust. Those were mine. Nobody made them easier. They were just necessary. And I made them. And they were worth it. Not because everything got easy after, but because I got to be whole while they were happening. If this story reached something in you, if you recognized that distance, that careful management, that rubber band you've been holding for months without saying why, type brave in the comments. That's all. Just that word. So I know you made it here with me. And if you want more stories like this one, stories about real things, about the courage it takes to stop pretending, there's a video on your screen right now. Click it. Take care of yourself. And until next time, I'll see you here.